Hello, and welcome to this digestion of the study Effect of Physical Training on the Capacity to Secrete Epinephrine. So, before we get into it, let's just set some definitions that would be useful. First off, epinephrine, another word for adrenaline, and that it's just a hormone that that increases glucose in your bloodstream and increases blood pressure, and it also activates your fight or flight response. Then there is hyperglucagonemia, which is when there is too much glucagon in your there's too much secretion of glucagon, which is another hormone that kind of works like epinephrine, but all it does is it goes to the liver and tells it to release some glycogen, which is just building blocks. It's not a building block, it's a storage of glucose. And it just, it increases blood sugar. Then there's hypoxia, which is a deficiency of oxygen in your bloodstream, and there's hypercapnia, which comes hand in hand with hypoxia, and which is just an increase in carbon dioxide in your bloodstream. So, what's the point of this study? Well, the setup of this study was that there were two groups of subjects. One were the untrained subjects, the control group / the T group, which is just the average person, and then there were the trained athletes, which was the T group. And then, because of past studies that had shown that after brief exercises and exhausting exercises, the trained group ended up showing that they had more epinephrine. They chose to do the study to see how the subjects' bodies react to the medical conditions of hyperglucagonemia, hypoxia, and hypercapnia. So, first off, hyperglucagonemia. As we see in this graph, they started off with the trained, the T group had higher epinephrine levels from the very beginning, and it slowly went up, had a steep increase, and it peaked at 3 minutes. Then it dropped and it continued on, and it had a more or less average, but a little bit above that, epinephrine levels. And it was the same thing with the C group, but they had lower epinephrine levels the whole time. And then there's hypercapnia. Here, the T group started with a lower epinephrine level, but it had an increase until 5 minutes that had the same slope as the C groups, but then it kept on increasing, but at a slower rate, while the C group ended up just not getting more epinephrine, which leads to you possibly thinking that maybe they ran out of epinephrine. And then there was hypoxia, and in this case, there is the C group and the T group. The C group starting off at a higher rate, just like in hypercapnia, but then having a slight decrease in its slope, while the T group had a high increase in its slope the whole time. What does this all mean? Well, for hyperglucagonemia, the fact that the trained athletes ended up secreting more epinephrine, even though they already have too much glucagon in their body, just might mean that now it's just the body is secreting it to use that glucose in the bloodstream and put it in the body. Otherwise, it would just be like a diabetes attack in which there's too much glucose that the insulin can't decrease in the blood, and therefore that would be just diabetes. So they had an increase in epinephrine to help the insulin out. So if this condition was pathological, which means that it happens all the time instead of in response to something, then in that case, the trained group would have less effects from diabetes than the untrained group, the C group. Then we have hypercapnia, and higher carbon dioxide levels ended up getting them to use more epinephrine in their body, just so their body's muscles would be stronger to end up releasing this carbon dioxide and getting back some oxygen. But since there was, we saw that the T group ended up needing less, we could maybe draw the conclusion that they needed less epinephrine because the body would secrete enough epinephrine to deal with any situation when it is needed. But we saw that, and we saw the same thing happen with the C group, but they needed more to do the exact same thing. And then with hypoxia, well, that is kind of a very similar situation. So that's exactly what happened. And now, what other conclusion that can we get other than just finding out how much training ends up helping with each medical condition? Well, predisposed genetic conditions versus environment and behavior. This study proves more than anything that one can increase their chances of decreasing certain مامان من اسم اون چیه که به مثلا آدم یه چیزیش مثلا آدم سرما میخوره میگن که سیمتوم هیچی could fight off some of the symptoms of your diseases, which ends up helping with feeling better in the long run. And this just shows that humans' environment and behavior could end up helping them. So then you could end up being less much like this guy, but be like this guy, being healthier. That ends up just relieving you of a lot of the symptoms. And here's my biography, and thank you for watching. And to conclude, I chose this study because of exactly those conclusions. I thought that people could change their future by changing their behavior. The future being getting certain health conditions such as hyperglucogonemia and diabetes by just staying active when they can. Thank you for watching.